All right, folks, welcome to the Monsters, Madness, and Magic podcast. I'm your host, Justin, here with a quick word before we dive in. Now, in this episode, I chat with paranormal investigator Shanclen about spirits of the Navajo Nation, Skinwalker misconceptions, Indigenous rituals, working with the Ghost Adventures crew, and more. I'll also be putting a link to his channel in the description below. As always, thank you all for listening out there. And if you're listening on your podcasting platform of choice and you'd like to help the show grow, please leave us a review. And if you happen to be watching the video on YouTube, consider liking the video, commenting, and subscribing because it does help. Anyway, without further ado, here you go. Shanclen, take us back in time, sir. You're a youngster. Were you a book reader, fort builder, troublemaker, or all the above?
Fort maker. Like for me, like it was a lot of like imaginary stuff, because my parents didn't really get us like a lot of toys like when we were younger and everything. So it's just like being on the res and everything, you'd learn how to like pick up a stick and just play with rocks, and then like you go on the couch and build up all the pillows and make a fort, reenact Lord of the Rings when I wanted to and everything. So hell yeah, man.
I'm with you. See, I'm in South Carolina, close to Georgia. I live in the sticks, so I was
Mhm.
always in the woods. Most of my
Hell
forts
yeah.
were just pine straws and fallen branches from pine
Hell yeah.
trees. And that's about it.
I was out there like pretending I'm Legolas and everything and all that with these sticks and all that.
So you grew up in Arizona, right?
Correct. Yes. So I grew up on a border town that's like right alongside the reservation. So that was pretty much where my parents could get work at the time. So I used to kind of go back and forth between the reservation to see my grandmother and my uncles and everything, and just kind of go back and forth like that.
Is that you're still in Arizona?
Yeah. I'm currently living in the city in Phoenix, but I will be moving back to the reservation next month. So I'm really excited for that.
When you think back, you're a little kid. What about formative films and TV shows that you grew up on? What comes to mind?
Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Starship Troopers, Godzilla too, like
Oof.
Godzilla 2000 and everything. Those were definitely like I remember those movies because that was like during the time when like we still had like Blockbuster and movie rentals and everything. And luckily, where my grandmother lived, she lived in Pinon, Arizona, and they had like a little movie rental place that was there. So one of my favorite memories when I was younger is, she would have the vehicle, she would go to work, and my uncle used to walk me and my brother to the movie theater or the movie rental place, and we'd rent movies there and be like, yeah, I get to experience new things. So we watch like Jurassic Park and stuff like that.
We didn't know we were in the golden times, man. Like just the experience of going to the video store just made
Yeah.
just made the movie even better if it was good, because you had to physically get in the car, you had to waste your time to go down there, you didn't just
Yeah.
click on it.
And then it was like one of those things is just like you were kind of excited and ready to see like a movie and just like you didn't know if like the movie theater had it yet because like these guys don't know these days. It's just like you had to wait like a couple months or possibly a year for the movie to come out like on cassette or DVD and everything.
And then the store might only have 6 copies, so you got to hope there's still one behind there.
Exactly. Like it's like, oh shoot, they're all gone. But then like the next day it's like, okay, well we'll check this one out and be like, oh my god, it's in. Let's go get that movie instead, kind of thing.
That's
Good
when box
times.
art mattered,
Mm,
because if the art sucked, you're probably not going to rent it.
hmm.
Same with albums and stuff like that.
Exactly, man. You just brought me back, bro. Those are good times.
So were you a big movie goer too? Did you go to the theater a lot?
Yeah, so I used to love like movie experiences and theater experiences, and I think with today's day and age, with like streaming and all that stuff, like a lot of these newer movies that come out, they like within a couple weeks they're on the streaming platform, but there's certain movies that like I see a trailer of, it's just like I have to see this in theaters.
Yeah.
I would like Twisters was one of those, or like Lord of the Rings, like The Hobbit when that one came out too. Like watching like a big cinematic music driven movie was definitely something I have to make sure I go watch in theaters for.
Yeah, that's how I feel about, Avatar. I don't think it's the greatest like narrative movie, but
Mhm.
if you see it in theaters, you get it. You're like, oh, this was made for this sitting down in the IMAX and being like, fuck.
Exactly. Yeah. You're just like, there's no way my TV can be this big. So I'm just gonna chill, have some popcorn, and just watch the movie, man. So hell yeah, dude.
So what records and cassettes were playing around the house early on?
Metal. One
Hmm.
of that was like one of those things. It's just like my mom really grew up with R&B, like 90s R&B. So she loved LL Cool J. We would listen to like Ice Cube and all that other stuff. But my uncle was kind of like on the flip side. He loved heavy metal, so we would be listening to like Iron Maiden, Metallica, Black Sabbath, all those different bands and everything. So, the reservation is kind of really heavily heavy metal oriented and everything. And I
Wow,
remember,
really?
yeah. So one of my first concerts I ever went to was a band called Soulfly. And oh god, I believe I was like 7, 8 years old when I went to that one. They went to a local high school auditorium in one of the reservation towns, and so my uncle, my auntie took me over there. So I was like little kid, just like enjoying heavy metal and everything.
Did you ever play any instruments or have any bands yourself?
I used to play the viola in junior high and elementary, but I stopped playing that because I had to go like towards sports and everything, so I couldn't take up that class. So, but currently, my uncle is a very good guitarist and everything, so he gave me one of his guitars, and luckily, a lot of my friends I grew up in high school are musicians. They have a band out too, so they gifted me with a guitar too as well. So I'm learning how to play that now. So that's honestly, it's like it's very meditative, man. It's to be able to just have it be with you and the instrument, and you guys just like space out everything, and you're just learning how to play, like growing the muscle memory of moving your fingers to the frets and everything, right string, and the coordination you need to be able to move your fingers in two different ways, pluck a string but be able to find the fret over here. It's an awesome skill to learn.
And when you get to the point where you could pick up a guitar and then just start playing your favorite riffs, and it's just very, it's great.
Yeah, do you play?
I play bass. I tried guitar and demoted myself to bass quick. I need less strings.
That's awesome though. Yeah, my uncle he plays the bass too and everything. So it's just like it's honestly really cool, just those deep tones, and it's really awesome.
So, Shanclen, a question I like to ask everyone is, I'm curious to see what you say to this, and feel free to take it whichever direction you want to take it with.
Yeah,
What scared you as a kid?
everything. I was one of those kids. You can ask my mom; she always tells me about it. It's one of those things that like I was honestly really scared of the dark. I was really scared of what my mind could create, I guess you can say, as far as for scenarios of the unknown.
Yeah,
So like it was pretty funny when we were very little kids. My mom took us to California to the beach one time, and I was having fun on the beach and just having a good time. But then like seaweed actually came and washed around my feet, and I flipped out. I freaked out so bad that like I jumped at my mom, and she grabbed me, and she just purchased like a brand new flip phone. And at the time, they were like the latest tech ever. So she was like, she couldn't grab me and the phone at the same time. So she ended up dropping the phone in the ocean to pick me up. And so she never let me forget that. She's like, I just got a brand new phone and I chose you over that phone. So don't ever talk back to me. But when it came to like paranormal stuff and everything too, growing up, especially in our indigenous culture, we go to a lot of ceremonies, especially from birth all the way to like current day. And a lot of times you would see a lot of things that like a lot of Western society doesn't really get to see, that I guess it can be frightening to be able to see. Like I'm not too sure if you know what like Apache crown dancers look like, or
I'm not
you know
familiar. No.
yeah, so they pretty much wear like a black cloth over their face, and then they wear like a headdress regalia kind of thing, and then it's just like it looks pretty wild. It's like something you would see like in Western people's eyes. You see that it's just like a horror monster, a horror
Yeah,
movie, but it's just
yeah.
like in actuality, it's a good spirit. These good things, and so you when you would go to ceremony sometimes, you would see spirits, you would see them make themselves known, and you're just like in your little mind, you're trying to process what's going on, and no one will ever believe you. And that would be one of those things, is like as a little kid growing up in school and all that, there was other natives that were there too, so then you're kind of hesitant to be able to talk about these things, and it's just like you mention it and they're like, yeah, I went to a ceremony like that too, and this happened and everything. But then you talk to a non-indigenous person, they'll be like, "What? That's so crazy," and all this stuff. They never experience it. So seeing stuff like that and everything, just having a wild imagination. I was just scared of everything pretty much. But today, not really much. No.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, from the outside looking in, obviously I watch your content, but it seems the supernatural is kind of natural to you,
Yeah.
what would you say your first experience with the spirit world was as early as you can recall?
That would have to be. Let me see. I'm trying to go deep in my files. Well, I would have to say maybe one of the houses that we used to live in was actually pretty haunted. And one of the more traumatic things that actually happened to me was I used to live down the hallway in my house and everything. And so it was kind of like an L shape inside of the hallway. And you would look out through my door and you would see the front wall of the hallway that would go down to the left. And for some reason, that wall right there was full from the bottom to the top with mirrors. So I remember one morning I was just sleeping and then I just kind of felt this weird like darker energy kind of show up and everything. And I kind of wake up, I was half asleep. And then I heard what sounded like a man chanting something. He was saying something. And I was just like, I thought it was my brother. And I was just like, what are you doing awake and all this stuff? And so, but then I look down toward my feet, toward the doorway, and I see a man with half of his body sticking out of the mirror, looking at me and doing like some hand gestures and saying something like that, like toward my direction where I was sleeping. And I was just like, like as a little kid, you freak out. And then like, my parents lived on the other side of the house. So when they came running, they turned on the hallway light and he disappeared. And
Wow.
so that was like one of those things. I was just like, yeah, those are one of the more traumatic beginning things I remember at that house. But there was a lot of crazy things that happened there.
Was it just you having the experiences? Did you talk to anyone else in your family?
Everyone did. Yeah.
Mm,
It was one of those houses that was like right behind us, on the other side of our wall that was right there in our backyard. There was a church that was right there. And so after we did a couple ceremonies too, I guess like the house was built on a burial ground long time ago. So it was one of those things in indigenous culture that if you like if somebody passes away in your house, or you're not supposed to build a home on top of a burial ground like that. If you do, you have to just move away
yeah.
and just build a house somewhere else. But this one was just like, well, we're paying on this house. We just can't up and move and stuff. So we would get like ceremonies regularly at the home to be able to just suppress those darker spirits that were there.
That's a straight poltergeist situation.
Exactly, man. It's pretty wild, dude. So it didn't get extreme as like the whole house coming in and like going to another dimension, but yeah, we experienced some things over there.
Maybe just within your culture specifically, not generally speaking, how much do you think belief goes into some of these things? If do you have to believe to experience these things, or have you seen people that don't believe maybe start to believe?
Oh yeah. One great example is one of our childhood friends that we had. He was half white, half Mexican, and so he kind of grew up in the same small town that we did too. And so he became really good friends with our family and everything. And so, when we would go out to ceremonies, my brother, he was really good friends with my older brother, and they would kind of talk about some of the ceremonies that we would have, things we would experience. And until, one year, they ended up moving in together into a house together. And so when he lived with them, some spiritual things happened while he was living with my brother. And so he was like, I remember that day because it was just like he was kind of in shock when he saw like a shadow spirit walk into the house and literally like break down the front door and go inside and like have to do stuff with my brother. And my brother had to chase away that spirit. And he was right there. He doesn't have indigenous like blood or descent in him. So like he saw that stuff and he was just like, oh my God, like, he was a very, very strong Christian.
Yeah.
And so, but like he was very open to other people's religions and everything. And so when he saw that, he couldn't explain it. And so like we had to sit down with him most of that night and just explain a lot of the stuff that just happened. It's just like, yeah, kind of happens when you live with us and everything. So yeah.
I was speaking to Charles Halford the other day. He's an actor who grew up in Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
He's not a Mormon, but obviously it's a huge Mormon community. And he was saying, if you're not Mormon within the Mormon community, there's sort of kind of an outcast situation going on. If someone lives on the res, or and if an indigenous person doesn't really have that spiritualness about them, is there that shunning? I guess I should say maybe.
You might get teasing, but it was
Mm,
one of those things that's just like, there's always like this concept of reservation Indian and a city native, because like
yeah.
you could be a native that lives off the reservation that doesn't know the teachings and stuff like that. So when they would like come to the reservation, they would kind of be teasing and stuff, but like, there's always that underlying like truth of like welcoming them, because when it comes to reservation and indigenous people, we like to talk shit to each other in a joking way,
Yeah. Yeah.
so but there is kind of stereotype things like that. But when it comes to like really sacred teachings and everything, if you're not of the tribe, we do like to try to keep that to ourselves,
Right.
just because of a lot of our ceremonies that we had didn't come legal in the United States until 1970s. So it's very, very like before that, like when we would try to run our ceremonies or anything, it was considered illegal. You can go to jail for that.
Wow.
So my grandfathers were the pioneers to be able to help fight against that. And so that's why, when you have like our peyote ceremonies that we call those Native American church sessions. We had to put Native American church in there just so it could be legal, because it's underneath like, Christianity and everything like that. So it was considered like a legitimate religion with the US government.
Right.
So, and then as well as with movies and everything that happened in the 50s and 60s, there's a lot of stereotypes, and there's a lot of people out there that try to steal the culture and ceremonies and profit off of it. Like a good example I'll give is Sedona, Arizona is like one of those towns where you have like a lot of non-indigenous people trying to do like, they'll say like, we'll give you a Native American blessing, but they're not Native American, and then they'll charge the person like like thousands of dollars to do a ceremony, and then like it's not even like legit kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like very, very like tight knit with the information that goes out there. So I would have to say like my generation is one of the first to kind of start sharing that information with people, just enough to be able to be like, okay, this is the information we want to give to be able to help people understand, the all this used to be kind of indigenous native land. And then people would have like the poltergeist situation that would happen at their house, and they don't know what to do. So that's why like I make my videos to be like, okay, well, this is how you deal with it if you're dealing with a native spirit kind of thing. So in a sense, yeah, if you're not of the tribe or anything like that, you will kind of like hit that wall of like, you kind of have to know somebody in the tribe to be able to get all that information and stuff. So yeah.
Are you conscious of it yourself when you're making videos? Maybe you'll edit yourself saying, maybe I said too much there. Let me edit that out. Or,
Yeah.
you know?
I've actually had like two videos so far where I was just like, okay, like I don't think I should put this out there, because there was one video where I was going to go in depth on a story that we had with a Skinwalker encounter, but I was just like, I don't think I should share like too much detail about our interactions that we had with it, because yeah, it was just like it kind of really got into the really deep spiritual knowledge, and I was just like, I got this feeling, and whenever I get these feelings, it's more so of like our spiritual deity is kind of saying like, no, people aren't ready for that yet. It's just like, just give them, start them out slow first before you start that out. And then normally I would tell these stories with like, even if you're not indigenous and I like become really good friends with you, if we're in person, then I'll tell the story and everything. But it's just like, if you post it on YouTube,
Yeah.
everybody can see it. And it's just like, there's a lot of people who just like can't comprehend a lot of that stuff that happens. So it's definitely happened before for sure.
Yeah. And you mentioned those experiences you had at the Poltergeist house.
Mhm.
Um, so at that time, how old were you, by the way? Were you just like a little kid?
A little kid. I was like 7, 8, 9 years old. Little
Okay, gotcha.
kid.
So obviously you're probably pretty freaked out.
Yeah.
So where along the line do you begin to, maybe start to understand the spiritual side of things a bit more and take it more seriously, I guess?
It was when my brother, he was selected to become a medicinal man in our tribe. So he was selected at the age of 13, and I
Wow.
was 9. I was 9 years old. So he would have to leave the home and go do his trainings and stuff, and he would come back. And I ended up becoming, as I got older, his helper with a lot of these ceremonies and everything, because it's my older brother. I love him so much, and I wanted to help him out. And if he ever needed anything with all these things, yeah, I was there for him and experienced a lot of stuff. So it's just like you kind of grow numb to a lot of these like creepy things that happen, because just like, you see it all the time. So it's just like, okay, well, it just kind of becomes the norm after a little while. But at first, it was definitely creepy.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about your videos, man, is you always acknowledge other beliefs in religion, spirituality, what have you. Was there a point when you were younger, would you did you ever struggle with wondering, how could all these ideas simultaneously exist and potentially be real? Was there a tipping
Yeah.
point where you were like, I don't know?
It actually started very very young actually because we I grew up with one of my best friends in my small town. He was of a different tribe. He was Hopi. And they had like their own beliefs and everything in spiritual deities, but when him and I kind of got to a certain age, like young teens, him and I would sit outside and we would just compare stories. We would just compare teachings like, oh, this is a taboo for us. And he was like, oh, really? That's like a taboo for us too. And then like certain different things like, oh, that's not a taboo for us and everything. So it really kind of flourished more when I left the reservation. I left the my border town I had and I moved to Denver, Colorado. And I was lucky enough to be able to work with a job that I used to go to different Native American tribes to install solar for them. And so while I was there, I would work with these guys. I would volunteer on these projects, and I would just hear all these stories, hear all these different things, but not even just indigenous people in that company. We had people from all over the world. I had a coworker who was from Jerusalem. I had a guy that was from Egypt, and all these other different things. And so we would just all talk about faiths and religions and stuff, and there was always like something that was like the same in all these little different things in spirituality. So that's why, like, whenever I talk in my videos, that's one of those things I always acknowledge. It's just like, this is just our perspective.
Right.
Somebody else might have something different, but this is just how we do things.
It's funny that you mentioned your friend that was a member of the Hopi tribe. I was going to ask you if you had any knowledge of, I guess, any similarities that the Hopi have with some of your beliefs, because I think the area that you grew up in is pretty close to the Hopi area.
Yeah, so we kind of surround them. Actually, they're
Mm.
like they have like their own little section inside. There's been like a lot of land disputes with the Navajos and Hopis, and so like like those older generation used to fight over land and everything. And so, but like him and I were of that new generation. It's just like so we're just like, well, that's their problem. We'll be friends and everything. So but yeah, so like certain things like taboos and stuff like that, like whenever you would see an owl, it's like would be a sign of death, or you see a coyote, it would be a trickster. And just like overall in general, how you respect spirits was the same. And they had different names in their tribe and everything, but it's just like it's just a different language.
Right.
So like, but they mean the same thing. And so that was one of those things that we always talk about. It was just like really amazes me. And hearing those stories. When it comes to the Hopi tribe, though, they're very, very, I guess you could say, closed off from the world for like as far as for their ceremonies and everything. I was lucky enough for him to invite me to a couple of his dances and his ceremonies up in the mesas and everything, and those are really closed off to everybody, unless like somebody that to be able to invite you. So they have like one of the oldest structures on one of those mesas that go back thousands and thousands of years. Little town that's up there, and it's just like it's closed off to even them too. There's like only one or two people that live in there to kind of maintain that stuff and everything. So very very beautiful culture indeed.
Wow. And I think one of the most common stories that you hear when anyone mentions the Hopi is giants. Does that does that ring a bell, or does anything pop out?
Yeah. Yeah, we have giants in our stories
Mhm.
too. Like a long time ago, like during the creation of this world, there was a lot of monsters and deities that used to roam the lands and everything. And so there's a thing called the monster wars a long time ago, where the spirits would have to fight off these evil and darker entities to be able to make sure it's safe for humans to live and thrive in the world. And so there were some giants that ended up that were good, so they ended up living with the people. But in time, they kind of just died out, or they're still in hiding to this day, kind of thing.
That's another just like your channels help me realize that there's a spiritual ecosystem in your
Mhm.
culture. It's because I where I grew up, it's Southern Baptist. It's either, well, that's a demon or that's a ghost. That's a demon or that's a ghost. That's pretty
Yeah,
much all there is. But
yeah. I think kind of what really helps with people understanding like the magnitude of a lot of these things that we like to use whenever we explain our spiritual stuff is movies. And we make a lot of Lord of the Rings references or Star Wars references, and for people to kind of get a grasp or some understanding of what it is. And so when I was young, they do tell you some things, and it's just like your brain isn't developed enough to be able to understand it. And until you like experience these other things, it's just like you would watch a movie and they'd be like, hey, orcs and Mordor are kind of similar to what evil and those guys are doing and everything. And then you can imagine like the angels or like the elves and stuff like that. So certain things like that, to my uncle would be great at that, to try to help me understand a lot of these things. And so, you know, that was kind of like one of those things. It's just like throughout the years of learning and knowledge, when your brain kind of develops more as far as for understanding and maturity, the elders and the spirits would kind of give you a little bit more information to be able to be like, okay, here's more, here's more, here's more. That's why like I don't give everything out in like one video and all that stuff, because it's just like, it's one of those things that my brother used to do with me. He was just like, all right, you ready to have a mind-blowing conversation about reality and spirituality? He's just like, I was like, yeah. And so we would talk for about an hour, and I'd just be like sitting there like questioning reality of what things are. And it's just like, it's one of those things. It's just like I'm only giving people like the surface level of spirituality and understanding. It's just like you have to learn that, because when it comes to these teachings of understanding, your brain has to literally bridge those connections, neural connections in your mind, to be able to unlock spiritual knowledge that you already have in your mind. It's just you haven't exercised the spirituality muscle in your mind to be able to understand or make those connections and just feel these certain things around you, kind of thing. So it's a process to be able to learn all this stuff in
Right,
a
right,
sense. Yeah.
right. Well said, man. Just one of the topics that you cover a good bit, kind of dispelling misconceptions is the Skinwalker.
Yeah.
I guess for folks that may not be familiar, that are just listening to this, could you give us some debunk some Skinwalker stuff for us?
Yeah, for sure, man. It was like one of those things that we grew up with a lot of Skinwalker tales and experiences and stuff on our reservation. And I would remember in school, it would be one of those things that like we would be on a sports trip and we'd be driving back at night on the bus, and we would tell like scary stories and everything with all our teammates and stuff. And we would tell these Skinwalker stories. And it wasn't until, a couple years back when TikTok and all those other things kind of showed up, that more so of like these beings or sightings of skinwalkers all over the place kind of showed up. And I was just like, I don't think I would watch these videos, and it would be like of some guy in a field, just screaming at something, or like a beast or a monster, and they would be like, "This is a skinwalker." I'm just like, no. So to where it kind of got to a point to where I was just like, okay, I kind of had enough. So I was just like, we in my time and everything, kind of going to these ceremonies and stuff on the reservation, we had our fair share of interacting with skinwalkers, and what they're traditionally called is a Yannick. So traditionally, you're not really supposed to talk about them, because you in a sense, when you talk about them, you create a neural connection with them, like in a sense, kind of like a little prayer.
Yeah.
And then there are spiritual deities that can be able to hear that prayer. So like, oh, someone's talking about me, I'm gonna go see what they're talking about. And they would kind of do witching stuff on you and stuff like that. So, but the teaching is supposed to go that a lot of people have forgotten really is, don't talk about them unless you know how to defend yourself against these things. So in my years and in my time, I really did learn how to protect myself against these beings and everything. And so, they do come from the Navajo reservation a long time ago. There's lots of stories about how that's like one of those things with oral stories. There's kind of like different versions of it out there, but the version that I was told was the Navajo Nation has four sacred mountains, two in Colorado, one in Arizona, one in New Mexico. So medicinal people used to have to travel the to those sacred mountains within 4 days. And so the spirit people taught them how to shapeshift into these animals to be able to traverse the land a lot quicker. So, but it kind of took a long time to be able to learn how to do that. So evil came along and introduced a faster, quicker way to be able to learn how to do that. And so they would entice a lot of people that didn't have a good heart, that didn't have the patience for these things. And so, but you had to do like a lot of bad things to be able to learn how to shapeshift in that way. You had to sacrifice a loved one. You had to do very, very horrible things to their body once you get rid of them and all that. And then you had to go and hunt one of the animals to be able to get their skin. And then again, you had to do very, very horrible things with that animal once you skin it and kill it and everything like that. So then you would learn the songs and the ceremonies to be able to learn how to use that power. And so, but a lot of people would ask me, it's just like, like, are these guys immortal? Are these guys this and that? And it's just like the difference between learning the good way and learning the bad way is when you learn it the good way is you learn how to use it based off your own energy and energies of good spirits. But when you learn it the evil way, you're borrowing power from a higher power, more powerful deity, I guess you could say, that's more evil. So in a sense, you get trapped in this ever looping, I guess you can say, task of like owing that higher deity, because he's just like, I gave you this power. Now you had to go do this for me. And he's like, I don't want to do it. He's like, okay, then I'm going to kill you then, kind of
Mhm.
thing. So you're kind of like in that constant loop of owing that higher level deity that power that he gave you to be able to do that. So yeah, pretty much there's definitely not as many of them as there were back in the day, because those were used during war times. If they wanted to use it for other tribes to be able to sneak into their encampments and steal horses, or back in the day when the cavalry used to show up too, those were used during the wars and stuff like that. But with technology and stuff like that, there's definitely not as many skinwalkers as there are out there physically, but there are still spiritual skinwalkers that are out there too. It's just like, they may have died physically, but they still owe that spiritual being. So spiritually, they still have to go out there and shapeshift and do all that evil stuff out there too.
Just curious, is there an origin story? Is there a first Skinwalker named, or is it just a general oral history?
Uh, from what I've learned, no. Um, Not the first one. Honestly, I never really asked that question. Who was the first? It's a really good question. I'll have to look into
Oh, if you
that.
find out, please let me know. I'm curious.
For sure, man. That's yeah, that's a really good question. I was just like, all these years, man, I never thought to ask who was the first. That's really, but I would have to imagine it would be before humans kind of came. It would have to be more of a spiritual deity.
Yeah,
So it would have to go way, way back in time to, because that's one of those things a lot of people in my comments would say, like, oh, Navajo Nation is the only place that has skinwalkers or Yanagloshis or jumping the skins. And I was just like, yeah, it is. But you have to understand that's a very specific type of shapeshifter. There's shapeshifters all over the world that are like different races, religions, tribes, all these other different things. Skinwalker or Yanagloshi is just a specific type of a shapeshifter.
right.
So, the art of shape shifting has, I think, always been here since the beginning of time. You have like, you think of stories like of Zeus shape shifting into like, a human man to be
Yeah,
able to like do all these different
or a
things. So it's just,
swan could
yeah,
bang some chick.
yeah, So this looks like shape shifting has always kind of been a thing. So, but the first Skinwalker, Navajo Skinwalker, I think would be a pretty interesting tale to learn from my elders.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned, some folks not being interested in speaking, even speaking about it because it could
Mhm.
attract, the energy. Are there people in your family or any friends that feel that way?
Definitely more so my elders, my grandparents and everything, but they understand the roles that we've taken in the years of training that we've done. The last person to kind of do what my brother does was my great great grandfather, and it kind of skipped a couple generations. And my brother is a guardian that is a protector of one of the sacred mountains in our tribe and everything. So, it's one of those things that, like, it was one of those lost ceremonies that was rebirthed through my brother and everything. So, there was worry, there is, and always will be worry, because we kind of do deal with the darker side of things. We disrupt what they do, so that, I guess you could say, there's always a target on our back.
Yeah.
But you just got to live life, always be ready for anything. So that's one of our teachings. My grandpa used to always say, he's just like, why are you guys sitting down like kind of how we are in our chairs? You're supposed to sit on your knees and be ready for the enemy to just come over the hill and be ready to attack you. So it's like, it's one of those teachings that like goes way back a long
Yeah.
time ago and everything. So yeah,
Stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
exactly. Pretty much, man.
Do you personally think there's anything to the the attention or the talking of it attracting a skinwalker because of that connection? Do you think that that could happen if you were to do it? You know, if you're
Yeah.
in the right area and you do talk about it, and do you think it would attract
Oh,
something?
well, yeah. So that would be one of those things. Is just like my mom used to kind of. She told the story when she was younger. She was at my great grandmother's place, and she didn't have no electricity or power. So when it got nighttime, you're supposed to go to sleep. So they were kind of up telling like creepy stories and stuff like that of the Anagloshi and stuff. And so one night, there was a window that was like right here, and then the I guess you can say it was like a 1.5 stories high, because it was built on an incline on a hill, and so there was kind of a big drop at that window, and then at night you just see a dog jumping up in the window to look inside,
Mm.
and then so she would be like, and so she woke up my great grandma and told her about it. She's like, "Hey, your dog is jumping right here," and she's just like, my great grandma flipped out, and then so she closed the door, the windows, and the blinds and everything, and then what was really awesome about my great grandma, she was never scared of these beings. She had a shotgun by her front door, and she would go out there, grab that shotgun with one hand. My mom used to say, "Go," and tell the kids to go to bed. She'd go outside, poof, 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 start shooting at those things and chasing them off. So yeah, like actual stories like that of like just talking about it, and them coming around. It's just like if you're gonna invite somebody in your home, you're gonna talk about them, better be ready for their whole party to show up.
Do you have a personal encounter that you can share?
So this one was at my great grandma's too. So where she lives at was a very kind of powerful, sacred place that was up there in the Navajo Nation. And the community wasn't really that good. So there's like a lot of, at the time, there used to be a lot of like skinwalkers and jumping the skins that used to go around and stuff. So I remember one night, I was younger. This was before I really started all my training. So I was in the very beginning stages. So I would have to say I was about 10 or 11. And so we show up at my great grandmother's place, and the sun had already set and everything. And so we pull up to the house and everything. My uncle was playing guitar, having a smoke outside and everything. So I went out there to sit with him. And my grandmother owned livestock. So she had a sheep corral that was kind of up in the canyon. I would have to say about 400 yards away. There was no clear line of sight to it. So, but she used to have sheepdogs that were there. And so the sheepdogs would start barking out of nowhere and just start doing all that stuff. And then not too long after, you started hearing coyotes kind of calling. There's a whole pack not too far away. I would be there, and my uncle would be like, "Here, come with me real quick." And then so we would kind of walk to where we got to a line of sight of the sheep corral and everything. And so when it comes to skinwalkers and Yanagloshis, they have a thing called a blood crystal. It's a quartz crystal that's like bathed in blood and all these other different things. And so what happens is like they have to wear that on their satchels to be able to help them transform or to be able to see whoever they're trying to witch and stuff like that. They would look into those crystals to be able to do that. And so when they do that, the moon spirits and the sky spirits of the stars would, in a sense, tell on them where they're at. They would shine their light through the stars of the moon and make those crystals glisten. And so you would see red sparks kind of all over the place up in the canyons and stuff. And so I remember that was like one of my very first encounters I had, like seeing those things. And then not too long after, you started seeing like where those red glints were, you started seeing like a manifestation of what looked like to be a human person running around up in those canyons. And so my
Mm.
uncle just told me, he's like, "Go back inside. You got to go back inside." And he called my brother, and then they went to go do business and chase him off and stuff. So
Wow.
yeah, I was just like, at a very young age, you see that stuff, and it's just like there's always reasons for teachings and stuff like that. So when you're very young and you see that stuff, it's just like try going to school the next day and you tell them
Yeah.
about seeing that stuff. It's just like, it's just like your teacher, "How was your weekend?" And it's like, "It was good, I guess."
You were just mentioning how other cultures have shapeshifters as well, and but the Skinwalker is specific to the Navajo. But I think one of the most common ones you see mentioned a lot, or maybe they get mixed up together, is the Wendigo and the Skinwalker,
Yeah.
but
So
not the same at all, right?
no, definitely not.
No.
So more so the Wendigo is more so, I guess you could say, of a curse that's put on you for consumption of the human flesh or consumption of the human body and everything. So a lot of people up there in the north, whenever they would like get stuck up in a frozen storm and they can't get food or anything, they would result in cannibalism and those dark ways. So that would be like a curse that was put on, like a spirit of a Wendigo would go in them and kind of make them go crazy, kind of thing. So it was like a result of an action. But when it comes to skinwalkers, that is a voluntary action that they go and do. So Wendigos, I'm not too sure if they can shapeshift or not. I haven't really met any of those tribes up there where it comes from. But yeah, definitely different entities altogether.
When did you start doing paranormal investigations and filming yourself doing those?
I would have to say about 2019. So
Okay.
I grew up watching like Ghost Adventurers, Ghost Hunters, and all these other different shows and stuff. And so, it was actually funny. I was at my girlfriend's place and we were watching Ghost Whisperer, and this guy was like channeling spirits of these celebrities that had family relatives that passed on, and he would give them messages from their past loved ones and stuff. And I was just like, our ceremonies kind of do something similar like that. And I was just like, I really thought about it, and I was just like, how can we, do something like that, but also give good teachings with it as well. So whenever we would go, when I had the idea to start investigating and all this stuff, when I would watch these TV shows, I felt like they missed a lot of true interaction with the spirits, because I feel like their goals were to just prove that they were real. Now, when it comes to us indigenous people, yeah, we know where they're real. So it's just like, how can we help them if they're a good spirit and everything? How can we? Because that was one of the tasks that we would always have to do is, if there was ever a bad sacred site that turned dark and evil and everything, there used to be medicinal people back in the day that used to go to these places to be able to nullify the energies to make it a holy site again. And sometimes you have spirits that are lost, spirits that are stuck. And so we have ceremonies to be able to help them on their next journey to the next world, or whether they go to heaven or wherever they believe in. And so I was just like, why don't we start doing that? That's why I had the idea to start up Unearthing the Supernatural with my brother. And so we would go to these locations, and at the same time, we would help the spirits that were lost and trapped, and we would try to give the spirits that wanted to stay, because that was sometimes that we would see that at some locations where spirits are happy with where they're at. That was one good example. I used to be a tour guide at a haunted ghost town called Vulture City, Arizona, and I'll tell you, all those spirits are happy because they lived in their human time in that town,
Yeah.
and that's their home. That's all they really love. And so it was like one of those more places where there's a lot of people that come around, they're interested in interacting, and like they didn't want to move on because they were happy with where they were at, and they were getting plenty of energy from a lot of the ongoers that used to go there, have fun conversations with them and stuff like that. So you have spirits that are okay with being at some of these places. So we would give them offering, we would give them food, we would give them kind of like supplies and everything. Be like, okay, well, thank you for telling us your story, where you come from, and to help give that understanding to a lot of these people of what is actually in the spiritual world and everything. So we did have our run-ins with evil beings too at the same time, not gonna lie. But a lot of times, even evil beings have their story that they can tell, warnings and reasons why, hey, you don't do this because you'll run into this guy that's over here,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So yeah,
So when it comes to, encountering negative spirits, do native practices and rituals and preparations, what have you, do they work on non-native entities?
I would have to say yes, because that was one of those things in a lot of my trainings I grew up on. We dealt with a lot more so of darker entities of native descent in the reservation. So when we would go do our investigations that weren't in those places, like I would say, that would be off the reservation, we would deal with, devils of like the Middle East, or a demon from India that we actually ran into, or a demon of like Christianity and everything like that. When it comes to a lot of our protections and everything we have, it's all natural based. A lot of our protections that we have go back to the creation of this world. And so that's where like it's like the foundation of protections when it comes to, because when it comes to like religions and everything, a lot of them are a couple of thousands years old. but this earth has, and these spiritual beings have been here for thousands and thousands of years since the beginning of time. So when you introduce natural based protections like that were here during the creation of this world, it tends to, those are like the natural laws that, even those spirits have to abide by. So in our creation stories that we had, when this world was first created, light came first and darkness followed after. There was always that fire that was there. And whenever there's a fire, in a sense, when you start a fire and everything, there's a lot of sacred teachings about it itself doing a ceremony. The element itself is doing a ceremony. It's turning a solid object into ash. It's turning, all that flames and that heat and that light and that protection turns that object into spiritual matter, I guess you can say. So that's why, like in one of my videos, I talk about ash is one of those bigger things that help protect people, is because that is the result of a spiritual ceremony that happens with natural based elements.
Mm,
So the fire has always been here on this earth.
right.
Fire and all that stuff has always been here since the beginning of time with that. So, when you use those natural based elements like that, you have the understanding of herbs and medicines and plants and stuff like that. Those have always been here. And even most times, too, those are older than the spirits that you're dealing with, the darker entities that you're dealing with. So it's just like they have to understand and abide by those rules, too. I guess you can say there's natural laws that kind of go with that stuff.
Right. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So, it must have been pretty cool for you. You just said you were a fan of Ghost Adventures and all that stuff. For folks that don't know, you were on a couple episodes. How did that come about?
Yeah, so it was actually at Vulture City World I started out at. So we went to go do an investigation over there, and shout out to Jay Marie Yates. They were really good friends of ours. They were actually running a lot of the paranormal tours that were happening over there at the time. And so they saw us. We went to like our investigations, and we were donned with like our armor and our sacred dish and our sacred regalia and stuff. And they were like, "Whoa, I've never seen anything like this." So we went to go do an investigation, and we helped them uncover more stories of giants at that location. And so he was very interested. We talked for a good like 2 hours, and he was just like, "Look, how fast can you guys get this episode out?" And we're like, normally it would take like 2 weeks. And he's just like, "Can you guys get it done sooner?" So we're just like, okay. He's just like, there's some people that are coming here. I think you know who they are, but I'm not going to say because I signed an NDA and I can't tell anybody who this is. We're like, okay. So we worked on it. My brother worked on it. He got it done in 3 days, sent it over to him. He loved it. And then he sent it over to Zach and those guys. And Zach said he loved it. And he was looking for people to kind of tell stories of the location and everything. And so um, and then so not too long after, he was just like, "Hey, Zach loved your video. He loved for you guys to come out there." And so we're just like, cool.
Yeah.
So being able to, we went out there, did a little ceremony for him, and helped him interact with a lot of the spirits. And then they even captured evidence of the giants that were there too. So it was pretty awesome to be able to meet him. It's just like that was like one of the first times I actually met more so of a celebrity where I was just like, holy crap,
Yeah.
I grew up watching this guy. So
Yeah, I'm
actually
with you.
see him and Aaron and Jay, Billy wasn't there, but see those three guys come walking up, and he was just like, okay, we'll wait on you guys. We'll wait till it gets dark. And then everything he said, could you guys go ahead and wait a little bit? Yeah, yeah, no problem. We walk away. We're like fangirls. We're like, and everything. So, but from our interactions that we've had, there's a lot of controversy out there with Zach and those guys,
Yeah.
but our interactions that we've had with them, they've been hella respectful, hella nice, very, very, punctual people, very professional. And, that's one thing that we loved. And, there's a second time they asked me to go to do an investigation for Skinwalker Invasion which was actually a really cool special in Utah that we did. So I went out there, and I was actually able to hang out with them for a couple hours and everything, because the first time we did the filming, and then they went back to their hotel, so we didn't really get time to talk with them. And so this time, though, the second time, I was actually able to have conversations with them and get to know them more personally. And they're just like us, man. Like
Yeah.
they're making their money, they're doing their thing, doing what they love, and it's just their bond they have with each other is awesome. It's just like, brothers from another mother, man. It's just like, they're all tight knit and one big family. And so, I had a really good time with them, man.
Yeah, just first of all, I'm a fan of Zach. I'm a fan. Like I grew up on the show just like you. When you were working with him, did you get the sense that there was still that, I guess, genuine curiosity, wanting to see if there's something here, or was it just making another episode?
He there was that, just because like even with us too, it's just like I'll probably be doing some investigations again on my own channel too. And it's just like there's just so many beings out there, man. Even for me, like when we would go investigate to these places, I was meeting all these types of beings I never met on the reservation. And it's just like there's countless beings that are out there. And and then I think Zach understands that too. And just like there's so many stories, there's because it's, in a sense, you get to talk with somebody that has a different mindset of back in the day. The one thing I always joke about and laugh about was like that investigation that we did in Vulture City. We did a ceremony there. That was probably the first Native American ceremony that was done in that town. And when we were doing that, Zach caught a photo of what looked like to be a cowboy holding a gun, like a Winchester rifle, behind us, and it's just like, yeah, the thing back in those times, like we natives used to raid the town,
Yeah.
raid the people and stuff. So it's just like, it's just like, yeah, I don't blame him for being upset and everything, but it was of the time, to be able to experience those energies and everything, those stories, is fascinating to me, and I'm pretty sure he feels the same way.
So when it comes to, some of the your rituals, do things ever get psychedelic? I guess is the way I can I can put it.
Some ceremonies, yeah. We use natural medicines and everything, but in a sense, when you use it in the right way, when you use it in a respectful sense, those medicines can show you certain things. Those medicines can be able to reveal and help you connect with a lot of the spiritual deities that you don't normally see when you're not on that, because us as humans, we were tasked to not know that stuff until we do meet our time. We do meet, our end and everything. And so, whenever Indigenous people would kind of have questions, they're going through something, they would consume medicine like that, and then it would show them things that like, okay, because you did this, this is what's affecting you in your life. This is why you're unhappy or bad luck's happening with you, certain things like that. So that's one thing I always tell people, it's just like, yeah, it's just like there's like all these other lab made psychedelic stuff and everything else. Just like I don't mess with that stuff. It's just like, there's always a reason and a purpose and a very, very respectful way to go about using these things and not recreationally. So yeah.
Just genuinely curious, do you know of any use of native use of marijuana or anything in any rituals?
I have heard of some tribes using it in a medicinal way, not our tribe, because it doesn't grow locally for us there. But I'm sure like if it does grow locally for these other tribes, I'm pretty sure they have their medicinal stories and everything with it too. I just haven't encountered them yet. So, but I won't say no because there's always a possibility for everything.
If you find them, let me know where that powwow is.
I got you, man. Yeah, tobacco is a really one of the sacred medicines we have in the Navajo Nation. So I'm having a tobacco smoke right now because we use it when we pray. We use it when we, in the stories that it goes is just like when you inhale the smoke, it goes into your spirit. And whatever you're trying to pray about, it's just like with fire. It turns a physical object into a spiritual object. So when you smoke this too, you're in a sense partaking of that ceremony. So if you ever had, you can't put into words what you're dealing with or what you want to ask the creator or God to help you out with. You partake of that tobacco, and it looks inside of you, sees what's wrong with you, and then it comes out, and then it goes to the spirit world. Your prayers go that way. So in some of my videos, I'm partaking in tobacco because like, I'm communicating with spirits to be able to help me, give me ideas, help
Right.
me make sure, the lessons I'm teaching don't go too far, but it's just enough for people to understand and give them the lesson I need to give.
Well said, man. So what advice would you give someone looking to dive more into the spiritual world? Is there anything that you would caution them about or point them in a certain direction?
Being open minded,
Mm.
being open minded, I think would be the biggest thing because, you know, one of the greatest paranormal investigators that I've ever met was investigator. His name is John Zaffis. He's actually the nephew of Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Wow, okay.
Uh, So I met him during Paracon. It's kind of like Comic Con, but for paranormal stuff. There was a paranormal convention going on over in Vulture City, and he came down to speak and everything. And so we had a smoke break with him too. We're having a tobacco smoke by the fire and everything, just telling stories. And he was just like, he studied different religions, he studied different faiths, and because that was one thing that even Lorraine Warren would say, you know, there's so many different, she understood that there's so many different types of spirits out there. And so whenever you would go and help them, you know, there's a certain way of going about interacting with them, you know, because if you say the wrong thing, you introduce yourself the wrong way, you'll piss off the spirit, kind of thing. So being able to be open minded about the possibilities that are out there, and just being a sponge, and just be careful, because like there's a lot of there's good entities, there's a lot of bad entities out there too that can lead you down the wrong path. So, you know, just be careful, be strong with who you are, where you come from, and your faith that you believe in. Just be strong with that, you'll be all right.
Well said, man. Speaking of bad entities, has there been a time in all your experiences where you've been freaked the fuck out, essentially, where you're just like, oh, well, you've been shaken after an experience, I guess?
Yeah, so it would have to be one investigation we did over at the, what was it, the YMCA in Globe, Arizona. So this right here, we ran into a deity to, in English, came out to word phantom. In a sense, is how we can describe it. And they're the masters of fear, in a sense. So they're kind of they're not evil, but they do dark things. They're their kind of own faction, I guess you can say. And when we went in there, it was very, very creepy, because normally, this was the first time I was experiencing this, because normally when you feel a dark entity inside of a location, you feel it.
Mm.
And when we did the walk through this location, we didn't feel anything, which was very weirdly, you know, we did the walkthrough, we went outside, we're just like, is this place even haunted? Like it's like a YMCA, you know, it's just like, I'm pretty sure a lot of good things happened here. And so, but it wasn't until we started the investigation that things started to get weird. It felt like something would just kind of, you would feel the energy pop up for a second, we would get a response on our devices, and it would just disappear. And we're just like, where the fuck did it go? You know? And then so, you know, and then it wasn't till we went to this one room, it was the old pool at the YMCA, that we started getting closer and closer to debunking what was actually there. And when we got close to it, I got this huge headache in my mind and my head. And this one was weird, because it started out in the front of my head, but then out of nowhere it starts moving. It starts like going like certain spots in my mind, and I was just like, I started getting dizzy, and I was just like, what is this? You know, I've never had a headache like this that moves in my head like this. And I was just like, I need to take a step back, I need to go out. And so my brother kind of had to perform a little my uncle, my brother had to perform a little protection ceremony on me. And while I was doing that, you know, I would look over into, because we're in the parking lot, and I would see the building, and I would be scared. Like I
Wow.
was already pretty like seasoned in all this stuff. And so like, no, I don't scare easy with all this. And I was just like, thoughts came in my head, and I asked my brother, I was just like, do you think we got enough footage? Do we have to go back in there? That was the first time I've ever actually said that, where I was actually like genuinely scared. And so it wasn't until at the end of the investigation where we actually found out what we were dealing with. And my brother explained to me, these guys will go into your heart and your soul and pull out literally that fear that's inside of you and put it in front of your face. No matter how stoic, how strong, they will find your fears and they will put that in front of you. And so yeah, they were the masters of the mind, I guess you can say. So I was just like, damn, man. So that was definitely one of those beings that I was just
Shit.
like, that brought true fear into me, like I was a little kid again. So it was pretty wild,
Was
man.
that years ago or?
I had it around 2021, so I'd say like three
Oh,
years ago.
okay,
So very
cool.
recent, man.
Yeah. In the same vein, what would you say? What's the most recent experience you've had?
Washoe Club was definitely one of those places in Virginia City where I we interacted with like an actual like demon from hell kind of thing. And one of our late friends that passed away, not because of that situation, but he was there at the time, he was still alive. And he was very, very, affected by this thing. And this was like one of those first times where we had SB7. And for those listeners out there, the SB7 spirit box is essentially a device that sweeps through white noise and radio frequency, and the spirits can talk through that. This right here, I would have to say, was some of the cleanest audio responses we were ever getting. And so, as my friend was getting affected, we were getting response like, "Hey, can I leave the room?" And they're like, "No, you're not allowed to leave the room." And they're like, "Yeah, but I need to go. I'm not feeling well." And then they said, "I said stay." And then so as he was leaving, they were saying, "Cut his throat," do all these different morbid things to him. And I was just like, "Fuck!" Like
Shit.
we've never had an investigation like this, man.
I'd be getting out of there too.
What was crazy though is like after he got affected, he went outside, felt a little bit better. Homie was just like, "I'm going back in there." I was like, "I'm gonna face this dude that's in here that's ever affected me." And so he went at it like a warrior, man.
Have you ever had anything follow you?
No. So in all of our investigations that we do, even if we investigate with like darker bad beings and everything, after every investigation, we in a sense, every investigation is like a ceremony to us. There always has to be an opening, there always has to be a closing. So whenever you finish up an investigation, we always offer tobacco,
Mm.
because in a sense tobacco is in a sense like how I told you, like, it's in a form of, I guess, currency, I guess you can say, in the spiritual world that they can use to partake and pray and do all those different things too. So you offer that to the spirits, and then you tell them, "I'm going to offer you this tobacco in exchange that you do not follow us home, in exchange that this is your place, this is your home, this is where you choose to reside. You're not allowed to attach yourself to our physical beings, spiritual beings, or any of our objects, or follow us home or anything like that." And we do like a little prayer afterwards too, and never had anything follow us home.
Well, that's certainly good. We were talking about metal earlier, man. I wanted to ask you about Clay and Fire. Is that your uncle's band?
Oh no, it's actually one of my high school friends
Okay,
is
cool,
a
cool.
band. Yeah. Yeah, those guys, I met them in high school. So like on my channel I kind of do like paranormal stuff, and then I also do like my road to like my production company that I'm starting up and everything. So I wanted to kind of get a little experience like with music videos and stuff, and I'll be having some movies coming out here pretty soon too. So I was just like, who can I ask? Because I can't ask like Metallica to do a music video because I don't have any credentials or anything. So, in a sense, to try to build up a portfolio, or something like that to be able to show people, I asked my high school friends, like, they started up this band, Clay and Fire. And I was like, "You guys have any music videos?" And he's like, "Nah." I was like, "You want one?" So, we're actually going to be filming one more music video with those guys next weekend. And yeah, it's just really good friends, really good guys that are in their road and doing their passions and creating their music and everything, telling their stories through music like that. So, yeah, really good friends of mine.
What kind of movies are you trying to make? You trying to just make some shorts, maybe some horror shorts, or
It's gonna be some horror shorts. Hopefully, in the future, I can do some feature long movies and everything, but definitely horror and maybe some comedy movies here and there too. Just kind of like I'm not too sure if you've seen like Reservation Dogs or anything
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, so something like that, to where like it's like reservation humor and it's just like reservation stories, because like our people love to laugh. Our people, it's the best medicine that's out there. So our humor and everything out there. So just, sky's the limit with what, potential projects it could have in the future.
Hell yeah, man. Well, I'm not gonna keep you all afternoon here, Sean Clinton, just to put a bow on this thing. What's on the horizon for you?
Yeah. So if you guys want to stay up to date, you guys can follow me at official Shanclen SSP on Instagram. I have a YouTube channel at Shanclen Shadow Productions. I might split that off in the future, but go follow me. I'll keep you guys up to date on that if I'm going to do like just one paranormal channel and one cinematography kind of esque channel. But definitely on the horizon, some movies, horror movies going to be coming out. One's in the work right now. Won't spoil too much, but keep an eye out for updates in the future.
Hell yeah, man. Sean Clinton, thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Of course,
Had a
man.
great
Thank
time
you.
chatting with you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for having me on, Justin, man. You rock, man. Hell yeah, bro. I'll share it on my channel and everything. So I'll help you out and all that stuff. And so thank you guys. Thank you so much for having me on, man. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. I appreciate you, dude.
Really great questions.